Hello everybody, my name is Peter Nelson and welcome to my show Gemology for Schmucks, where I'm going to tell you all the basic things you need to know to appreciate gemstones and to buy them with education. Because realistically, gemstones have been around for so long and there are so many and so many different qualities that it's very easy to make a mistake and spend a ridiculous amount of money if you don't know how to look at what you're buying. It's just like any other product out there. You need a certain amount of knowledge about what the thing is before you can buy as an educated consumer. So that's what we're going to get into today. This particular episode, what I want to talk about is the most important aspect that affects the price of a gemstone, and that is color. So color is made up of three essential things, and this is much more than just kindergarten, all right? So the first thing in color is hue, and I'm not talking about Mr. Hefner, okay, over there in his mansion, so you need to stop being so suh. By the way, that's a Chinese word that means color, but it also means perverted, so there you go, you've been culturally enriched. Moving on. We have hue. The next thing we have is tone. So tone is how light or how dark a gemstone is. And the final one is saturation. Saturation is how much color is in that color. Maybe it's a little bit confusing for you, but we'll get into it with examples in the gemstones and hopefully it'll make all sorts of sense. Jumping right in here, what I'd like to talk about first is hue. Hue in everyday language is what most people would call color, but color is more complicated than that. So we're going to focus first on hue, and you can see that each of these stones in front of you has a different color, or a different hue, if you will. Now let's start in the bottom left-hand corner. This right here is a sapphire, and I'll let you in on a secret. Everything in this parcel is a sapphire, except for you. This one right here is actually a ruby, but they're the same mineral. Rubies and sapphires are the same crystal. Chemically, they're absolutely the same. The only difference is that once it gets red enough, then we call it a ruby. All right, so this right here is what most people know of as a sapphire, and this is just basic blue, right? But what I want you to look at is this blue alongside this right here. Now, to some people, it's obvious immediately. To other people, you got to look twice to find out that this one right here is that certain bluish purple that's actually called violet. I mean, who uses that word anymore? I didn't start using it until this past year because I thought it was just, purple. But turns out this is actually purple. And did you know that in the visible spectrum, as far as science defines it, purple does not exist? Gasp. All right, so purple, according to science, is just a mixture of red and blue. As far as the electromagnetic spectrum goes, and the wavelengths and all of these things, there is no place on the electromagnetic spectrum for purple. It's something that our mind creates for us. Anyhow, moving on. If you look at these very faint colored sapphires, you can see that even though they are faint, they are light. Some people might even call them white sapphires. But as you look at them, and you look at them closely, you can tell that this one and this one, while they're both yellowish, it's not the same type of yellow, right? So in this way, we say that the hue between these two sapphires is different. This hopefully is a more obvious difference, having a bit more of a green to it. If you compare that with this one over here, you can see that they have somewhat of a similar hue. The type of green is quite similar on these two stones. But this one is substantially lighter, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit later with both tone and saturation. So moving right along, we just talked about hue, and let's look at an example here. So if you look at the far left-hand side, you can see that this and this are both some kind of reddish pink, but they're different types of reddish pink, right? So if you're used to fashion and all of these things, then you're used to talking about warm and cold colors or cool colors, whatever you prefer. And so that's what I'd encourage you to do. When you're already in the area of red or pink, that's great, but what can we do to differentiate this kind of red from this kind of pink? Is it fully red, this one? No, it's not. It's got a little bit of an orange, right? So in gemology, most of the time we would just say it's an orangey red, okay, or slightly orangey red. It's very, very lackluster as far as the naming process goes. But if you look down here, you've got a refreshing pink, right? You can call it lilac, you can call it whatever you want. I don't particularly care, as long as in your mind you know how to separate it. So this is, if you want to just, use man language for a minute, you can call them both pink, but this one is a orangey pink, okay? This one's a little bit of a purplish pink, whatever works best for you. So that's hue. Just find a way to name it, find a way to see it for yourself. Next thing that I would like to talk about is saturation. So saturation is how much color is in your color, or you can kind of think of it as how thirsty or satisfied your color is. So for the same given color, you might even be looking at this one and this one. Hopefully you'll start to see a little bit of a difference in how much intensity there is in that color, and even moving along to this one. Forgive the slight differences of hue. Gemstones are one of those things that it's made by nature. None of it's going to be identically the same, and that's actually a huge part of why color is so important. If you find a color that you like, there is a chance that you may not find it again. If you look at each of these stones, they're essentially the same hue. They're all some variety of purple, but some of these look very thirsty because of the saturation and a tone issue. So saturation, as we just spoke about, is how much color is in your color, but you also have issues like right over here. These stones that on the camera seem pretty much black, but that's only because their color is so dark tone, that they seem black. If you're close enough to it, and you've got strong light, like I have in this light box, it actually is purple. You can see the purple, but the tone is so low that it appears black. And so when we talk about color, the last thing that we need to consider is the tone. For a given color, how low is the tone? How dark does it get? And saturation can also bring down the tone. So if we look at these over here, these in front of us, we can see that these are very low saturation, so the color looks very thirsty, but it's also very light stone. It's closer to that colorless, closer to that white. But if you've got them in your hand, or if you compare them on a white background like this, you can see that they are indeed purple. They do have that purple-violet going on. And to close out here, I'd like to do a review using these rubellite tourmalines. And once again, color we're breaking down into hue, saturation, and tone. So what I've done here is I've got 3 different hues. They're generally the same in the column. These are kind of an electric magenta or fuchsia, whatever you'd like. Here we've got something going into the more brownish tones, and these are quite brown, a little bit orangey. So the hue on each of these, I tried to match them as closely as I can, but as I said before, Mother Nature has her way. She always makes things unique. Alright, so if we start here with our electric fuchsia, you can see that down here we've got the least saturation. It's a little bit thirsty. It's still a nice pink, don't get me wrong, but it's not as intense as when you go up the line here. So right here in the middle, I'd say, is a very addictive type of electric fuchsia. This is just a name I made up, by the way. It's not a trade term. Disclaimer, asterisk. And as you go up even further, you can see that the saturation has gotten so intense and the tone has gotten a bit dark. So that makes this stone a little bit sleepy looking. When it catches the light just right, it's very nice, but otherwise, it's a little bit difficult to see. So sometimes saturation does contribute to a less desirable stone, because if it's too saturated with a little too dark of a tone, you really just can't see the color as well. But goodness, look at that. So moving along. Here, we've got something a little bit more in the sorbet, but you can also see down here we've got these thirsty, low saturation stones moving up into a little bit more saturated, but definitely a darker tone, and this one by far is the most saturated, but also the darkest tone. So you got to decide what you like, and more importantly than what you like, what is popular at the moment, because popularity always drives up the cost of the commodity. So over here, we've got, these are actually quite a similar hue, right? You could even say that these are cousins right here. You could. But for this tone, you can see that this is the lowest saturation in a very, very light tone, moving up to a little bit more saturate. It's nice, quite pastel, but still not very saturated. And it's a little bit, it's hard to tell with the tone. You could say it's a light tone, you might be right, but it also could just be low saturation at this point. And then finally, you can see this pretty intense. I'd say maybe 40% saturation stone, but the tone's not too dark. So as you move it around, it still has a fair amount of life. Okay, that's all we've got for today. Thank you for joining me. My name, once again, is Peter Nelson, and thank you for joining us for Gemology for Schmucks, and I hope that in the videos to come, we will become less and less of a schmuck and have a better idea of how to buy gemstones, understand what they are, what makes one more beautiful than the other, what makes one more expensive than the other, all of these things. And we'll figure it out as we go. So, see you next time.